Today, we have a Stamina Dragonknight build which is unlike one that I've ever showcased before. It uses more than its fair share of magic costing abilities, an Inferno Staff, a new improved two-hander ability in Stampede, and the new Mythic, the Harpooner's Wading Kilt. Best of all, it's one of the most competitive Stamina Dragonknight builds for endgame. There is a hell of a lot going on here. Hi, this is Liko, and this is my Stamina, but kind of hybrid Dragonknight build and rotation video for the Blackwood Chapter. With this build, we've achieved, as you can see, 105k DPS, which is in line or perhaps even better than other more traditional stam DK combos, such as with a bow or dual wield weapons on the back bar. If you are looking for something a bit more traditional, please do check out this other Stamina Dragonknight build video of mine, which has been updated for the new Blackwood chapter. Both of these videos are thanks to LordReaper. Thank you so much for putting together the passes for everybody here. You'll see that he has many Dragonknight themed videos on his channel. Here is what we have coming up in this video. Treat this build as a baseline that you can adapt from. Now let's get straight into the build fundamentals, the choice of race, Mundus stone, food and attribute points. So for the choice of race, Orc used to be the flat out best for stamina DPS, but this is no longer the case. From now I will recommend either Khajiit or Dunmer as your very top choices. It's a toss up between the two, so honestly go with whichever you prefer out of those. However, having said, Orc really isn't too far behind. It still has some other very useful perks, so if you're currently an Orc, this doesn't mean you have to race change. So for the choice of Mundus Stone, in many cases for stamina DPS, I would recommend the Thief Mundus Stone for extra critical chance. If your crit chance is already pretty high before picking a Mundus Stone, like around 65 or 70%, then you could go with the Shadow Mundus Stone instead for extra critical damage. Now I can't put an exact number on it, as it will depend on your exact build that you set up with, but if in doubt, I would go with Thief. Choice of food. Now this will most likely depend on your level of sustain and your HP threshold that you're comfortable running with. If you could do with a little more extra sustain and you don't feel like you need the extra HP, then lava, foot, soup and salt rice would be the way to go. If you're practicing on a target dummy, then I would also recommend selecting this food. If your sustain is decent but you need a little help with it and you need some HP as well, then I would recommend the Arteum takeaway broth, which gives the best mixture of everything useful. If you don't need any help with your sustain, then you can go with max HP, max stamina food such as braised rabbit with spring vegetables, and this should give you the most DPS as long as you don't run out of resources. Go with 64 attribute points into stamina. If you need a little bit more HP, then it's fine to add a few points to HP instead. Otherwise, try using food to adjust it, it's much more convenient. Alright, let's get started with gear then. I'll firstly show you what we're using here, and then I'll also go through a few alternatives. We have one piece of slime coral, which gives the best crit chance bonus. On the body we have 5 pieces of Reliquin, which still gives the best single target DPS. We also have the Harpooner's Wading Kilt, which in most but not all situations should be your best bet. We then have Kinra's with a Maul on the front bar on this occasion to help us reach penetration cap. If you are okay reaching the cap, then you could consider a Great Sword or a Battle Axe instead. We're also using damage poisons here. The Major Berserk aspect is pretty nice since it will boost all types of damage, which is really good for a hybrid. On our back bar then, we are using a Maelstrom Inferno Staff. Now you might have seen this on all of the Magicka builds, but it has one of the set bonuses where the special effect really does help stam the build too. And another reason why we're using it is that it can easily fit in with the Stam DK rotation, which we'll go through shortly. Possible alternatives can include Solfkin, Advancing Yokida and Leviathan, and we can also consider 2 new sets, Solzan's Torment from the new Rockgrove trial, though possibly only better in 4-man and solo arena or dungeons content. And then we have Diamond's Victory, which is a new crafted set. Advancing Yokida, Solfkin and Diamond's Victory all give pretty good value whilst frontbarred. As for monster sets, I would probably stick with 2 pieces of crit to be honest. The Zaan or Dummy House would honestly fit the bill here too. Moving on to the skills, I'll go through those on the bar and then a few suggested alternatives along the way. For these skills on the front bar, we firstly have Stone Giant. This is our main spammable here. There is a special debuff associated to this called Stagger, which is quite beneficial to have in 12-person raid groups since it boosts everyone's damage, really. Often you'll have a Dragonknight tank that handles this debuff, but having a Stam DK do it is also a very viable option too. You'll need to make sure to use this skill at least once every 5 casts to keep up the bonus. The first cast of 3 is always a channeled ground stomp as well, so do bear that in mind. It's quite difficult to bar swap off, for example. You could also slot and use Wrecking Blow if you do not need to keep up the debuff, as I think it will probably do a little more damage. Consuming Trap is a magicka costing single target dot that does physical damage. It lasts 10 seconds and it's good to have since it does really well for your stamina sustain. Stampede is a newly changed skill which now does a little more damage on impact, but a hell of a lot more from the damage over time component. It leaves a relatively small AoE on the ground when you cast this skill. It seems to work a little bit better if you do move a little bit whilst casting it though, so do bear that in mind. Executioner is a really strong execute, especially in the last 10% of an enemy's HP, but from roughly 40% and below you can use the skill instead of Stone Giant as a spammable, but do remember to keep up the Stone Giant for the stagger debuff if it's still needed. The other morph, Reverse Slice, is also pretty good and might be worth using in trash fights. The 5th skill on this bar is Barb Trap. It gives a passive weapon damage boost thanks to the fighter skill passive, in addition to the nice dot and minor force buff. The ultimate on the front bar is Flawless Dawnbreaker. There again for the fighter's guild passive, but in terms of actual use, you should only really use it if you know you won't be able to charge up and use a Standard of Might, which is what we have slotted on the back bar. And yeah, this is one of the best ultimates in the game. Stand inside it for 15% bonus damage and reduce damage taken by the same amount. Also applies Major Defile and a Synergy and lasts 20 seconds. We then have Molten Whip slotted. This is purely for the Seething Fury passive, which will stack up whenever Noxious Breath, Flames of Oblivion or Standard is cast in this case. This is a flex spot, so should you need bar space for like a heal or something, then this is the one to replace. Next we have Flames of Oblivion. It scales with your highest offensive stats and costs magicka, so really nice for a stam DK for these reasons. It also fires a second fireball if there is a second enemy to hit, so there is a little cleave as well, which is again nice to have. Noxious Breath is a conal AoE dot with a relatively strong upfront damage portion. It lasts 14 seconds like Venomous Claw and also debuffs the enemy with Major Breach. Next we have Venomous Claw, which is like the strongest single target dot in the whole game, I think. Insanely powerful and really cheap as well thanks to the Combustion passive, which restores 500 stamina when you inflict poison status effect, and the World and Ruin passive, which decreases cost of all poison abilities by 25%. And yeah, this Stam DK has a bunch of those. It lasts 14 seconds and actually I don't believe the tooltip itself accounts for the increase in damage over time, so again bear that in mind. Finally we have Wall of Elements, which is needed for the Maelstrom Staff to give us the bonus. This morph is 14 seconds long, which is the same as Venomous Claw and Noxious Breath, which we can use to advantage to make an easy rotation. It scales with our magicka stats, so the damage itself isn't that great, but the key things such as proccing enchants and providing the light attack buff is achieved. If you want to use an alternative backbar weapon, then again I'd suggest watching my other Stam DK video, which you can find in the description. Alright, moving on to the past then, I'll make this quick. Many things about the Stam DK don't really change here. In the end, it's still keep up your dots and keep up stagger from Stone Giant, as it has been for the last couple of years. But to help break down the rotation, we can use the fact that each of our backbar skills are either 14 or 15 seconds long. So we can simplify it down to a 15-second rotation to make it easier. This rotation will be posted in the description below the video. Thankfully, every player now has access to dot timers, so it will be easier to keep up skills which are not 14 or 15 seconds long like Stampede, which is one of our stronger dots now. If you want to get a little more out of Seething Fury from the Molten Whip passive, you can break down the back bar into 2 or more sections so that the bonus lasts a little longer. At about 40% you can swap out extra casts of Stone Giant for Executioner, since at this point it will do more damage per cast. In addition, if your sustain is looking good, then you can probably drop Consuming Trap here as well. Anyway, I'll leave you guys to enjoy the rest of the pass. Let's catch up once the Iron Atronach has met its end. Cool, so then looking at the past, Stampede did a total of 8k DPS, which is actually really good. I guess what's most interesting is the effect of the Maelstrom Staff on the back bar. Blockade of Fire did 2.5k DPS, which isn't that great, but it would have helped the Flame Enchant and therefore Burning Procs do some work. In terms of light attack bonus damage, this is a rough estimate, but here we did an average of 19.7k or so with an average hit, whereas without you'd be looking at roughly a 14k average hit, which is a 40% increase. And this in total equates to around 5k, which is roughly 5% of our total DPS, which is pretty significant. As you can see, there are also, aside from this, so many different damage components which all do eventually add up. Looking at the blue CP Slottables then, we've gone with Fighting Finesse, Deadly Aim, Backstabber and Master at Arms. Thaumaturge is no doubt a great alternative if we cannot use Backstabber. Alright, so that's it from me on the Stamina Dragonknight in Blackwood. If you want further inspiration, then again I would recommend you check my other Stamina Dragonknight build video, which goes through 3 other different setups. Be sure to subscribe, like and comment on the video to help me out, and consider becoming a patron or check out a further build video of mine for Blackwood, of which you can find a lot more on Liko.gg from many other creators as well. Anyway, thanks for watching this video today. This is Liko. Have a good day and I'll see you soon.